Thanks, everyone. So, as an artist consultant, I do a lot of traveling in my line of work. And recently, one of my best friends flew down from Toronto to join me on a road trip. Now, our road trips are generally filled with lots of things like sing-alongs to 90s hip-hop and listing some rhetorical question answers. So on this particular occasion, I asked her what her number one greatest fear is. Her answer, being startled, followed closely by bugs. My answer, number one, death, followed closely by ghosts. Now, I can't help you with ghosts because they're indestructible and they will likely come and get us all. But what I can help you with is a little tactic that I've learned to sort of help ease the fear of death, and that is by creating an art bucket list. Okay, so an art bucket list is very similar to a normal bucket list. Instead of having the things that you want to do before you die, like skydive, or be a guest judge on RuPaul's Drag Race, or slam dunk on LeBron James. Those are just some things I want to do on my bucket list. They're the artworks that you want to see before you die. I thought of it as a way to see the world and witness in the flesh some of the works that changed my life. And what I noticed is that with each artwork I crossed off the list, I became a little less anxious about death. So today I'm going to share with you 4 of those items on my bucket list. And what I hope you'll notice at the end is that it wasn't so much about the actual artwork itself, but about the journey and the lessons I learned along the way. So first, a little bit of backstory. It wasn't typical for someone in my family to go to art school. I'm from a pretty traditional Chinese family, and it just wasn't in the cards. But somehow, by some freak chance, I got to do it. I was allowed. I think it maybe has something to do with the fact that my brother did a degree in engineering first, and by the time my parents got around to me, they were just way too tired to argue. So I already felt like a rebel when I got there, right? I had bleached my hair and dyed it pink, and I even put dreads in it. And if you're wondering what Asian hair looks like dreaded, the answer is bad. I pierced any loose flap of skin on my face, and I wore scrap metal as jewelry. So I already felt like a rock and roll badass when I got there. And I was super psyched and ready to learn about other badasses, rock and rollers in the modern art world. So I'm talking about like the Jackson Pollocks, the Yoko Onos, the Andy Warhols of the art world. So you can imagine how surprised I was when I arrived first day to see this guy on the screen. Edouard Manet. This guy is definitely not a badass. I mean, and Impressionism? Come on, yawn. Even he looks bored, right? But what I realized later is that this dandy little man was actually one of the greatest rebels of his time. And here's why. Manet's Olympia. Now, I know what you're thinking, just another naked lady on the bed, right? We've all seen him before, there's a million of them. Nude lady, hanging out in her room, chilling, amongst her wealth and security, having a great time. Manet's Olympia was different. All the little indicators and signs and symbols in Manet's painting actually meant, clear as day at that time, that she was a prostitute. Right? Okay. Now, Manet's actually referencing Titian's Venus from a couple hundred years back, with all the same elements in it, but turned on their heads just slightly in little ways to make the audience, which were the elite bourgeoisie at the time, feel uncomfortable. So what are those elements? 1, jewelry that she's wearing, gifts from her suitors. Flowers, another gift from a client that Olympia doesn't even care about, doesn't even look at it. Right, dirty shoes from walking the streets at night, hustling. This cat, okay, up in its upright position, as opposed to Titian's dog here that's sleeping soundly. Dogs represented chastity and obedience and fidelity. And we all know dogs are man's best friend, but let's get real, cats like to have more fun, right? Especially this cat. Cats represented the nocturnal, the night, promiscuity, sexuality, and the French word for cat, chat, is slang for something that I'm not allowed to say here on the stage today. But I can give you a hint, it hasn't changed in 200 years. Okay, same word. Her look. Now she doesn't have that like, come hither look, I'm just hanging out in a room. Come over. She has more of a bam, paint a picture, it'll last you longer kind of look. She's aware, she's unmoved, she's defiant. She knows her role and the society that she's in. So when this showed in 1885 in the Paris Salon, audiences were outraged. They thought it was the most vulgar thing they had ever seen. They demanded that it would be torn off the wall and burned immediately. And Manet was like, no, you have seen it before. You see it every day in your own backyards. This is not a goddess. This is reality. Deal with it. People were, as you kids say, shook. And basically, Manet was like the Kanye West of his day. This changed everything for me, okay? Where I once saw this as just your run-of-the-mill, snooze fest, nude lady, was actually a huge middle finger to the upper class at that time. But had I not known that, I would have gone with my initial interpretation of it, which was totally limited. I had to first understand the tradition before I could understand the rebellion. When I finally saw the piece, 14 years later, at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, amongst a bunch of crowds, kind of uninterested, I saw Olympia, and it was like I knew something that maybe they didn't, other people didn't. That this seemingly innocuous piece actually caused such a controversy that it was nearly destroyed. And when I looked into Olympia's eyes, and she looked back at me, it was like we were both in on the secret. Next up, we have American artist Janine Antoni. Janine is a performance artist and sculptor. Her work deals with feminist ideals, domestic rituals, roles of women. And I first saw Janine's work in a magazine about performance when I was 16 years old. It was this picture of her painting the gallery floor with her hair dipped in a bucket of black ink. And I thought to myself, whoa, this lady is nuts. And I want to be her. But of course I couldn't be her, because there was one thing standing in my way, in my mind, and that was being Asian, okay? And being Asian meant always obeying your elders and practicing lots of piano and never, ever, ever rocking the boat, no matter what. But at the same time, I was also being raised in Canada, right? On American and Canadian television and reading Sweet Valley High books, where the message was, stand out, make waves, carve your own path. So don't rock the boat, make waves. Don't rock the boat, make waves. It's all very seasick-inducing. Meanwhile, all I really wanted was three things. 1, to be an artist. 2, to be a radical. And 3, to be a blonde. And that feeling followed me all the way into university, where I moved across the country, knew no one, and no one knew me. So I thought, I have a blank slate. I have a chance now to completely divorce myself from my Asian heritage. So you guys know how, like in prison, they say to survive, you have to, like on the first day, you have to find the biggest, meanest guy there and make him your enemy? Well, I found the tallest, blondest girl and made her my friend. Now, spoiler alert, while I made a friend for life, ride or die, What didn't happen was I didn't feel more comfortable with my Asian heritage. I definitely didn't blend in. So that didn't work. The piece, though, that I want to talk to you about today by Janine is one called Lick and Lather, where she's created 14 self-portrait busts of her, 7 out of dark chocolate, where she's licked away the face until it's disappeared, and 7 out of soap, where she's bathed with the pieces until the face has also disappeared. Now, this piece provided so much amazing contrast for me. On the one side, we have the dark chocolate, representing indulgence and consumption and all those feelings that kind of come along with it, like shame, embarrassment. The other side, we have the soap, which is this obsession to be clean and pure, and just so visually striking are the two. Now, it wasn't until long after university that I finally accepted my Asian heritage and my Canadian upbringing and the third space that it holds. And what I realized is that the tension it once had is what's made my life interesting and what's made me strong. When I finally saw Janine and Tony's work many years later, it was a powerful reminder that you can so often lose yourself in the process of trying to figure out who you are. Yves Klein is a French post-war artist, performance artist. And what he's maybe most known for is Yves Klein Blue, International Klein Blue. That's what you see on his hand. Now, he didn't invent this color, but he did find a way to synthesize it from this rock, lapis lazuli. In its purest state, it didn't need a carrier color to go with it, so it could be shown completely unblemished. So when he finally figured out how to do that, he became obsessed, and he put it on everything. He covered huge canvases with it, gallery spaces, the walls, bodies, he covered in this blue. Because it was in this blue that he discovered what he called le vide, or the void. So Yves Klein wasn't new to this idea. He was already a judo master. He was a 4th degree black belt. And in judo, they subscribed to the idea, the Buddhist idea, that there's power in the nothingness. That there's calm, and you can find more of oneself in that empty experience. So Yves Klein started to put the nothingness into everything. He wrote symphonies without any musical notes. He wrote books without words, and he had these huge exhibitions that thousands of people would come to that had nothing in them. But it was really this blue that he felt represented that infinite nothingness, because it drank in all the light around it. A critic has compared this blue to the Grand Canyon, calling it unbearably quiet, that the power comes from the emptiness. Another critic said that it eradicated the space between earth and sky. The piece today that actually is on my bucket list isn't one of Yves Klein's blue pieces, but it's one called Leap into the Void. And it is of him jumping out his 4th floor window of his apartment building. Now, don't worry, this is not like the last known photo of Yves Klein before his untimely death. It is actually a photo montage, so cutting and pasting, basically Photoshop before Photoshop. And what I love about this piece is that it really embraces the unknown fully. 6 years ago, I quit my job at one of the top galleries in Canada, a job I very much liked and worked really hard to get to start my own business. And I didn't really know anything about what it meant to be an artist consultant full-time. It was just something I did on the side because I liked it and because the need was there. I was terrified. That very same summer, I went to the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam to see Leap into the Void. And it was such a strong reminder to embrace and even plunge yourself into the unknown with arms open wide. Today, we have over 1,000 clients that we see one-on-one, and even more that we see in seminars. I love what I do, and I haven't looked back since. Last but not least is Kara Walker. Kara Walker is an American interdisciplinary artist, arguably one of the most important artists of our day. Her work speaks to ideas of violence and racism, sexism, and the legacy of American slavery. Not just its ideological or physical abuses, but also like the humanity and spirit of those affected by it. Kara is really known for her panoramic paper cutouts, these tableaus that she creates that are incredible to see. But the piece that I want to talk about is one called A Subtlety, or The Marvelous Sugar Baby, that showed in 2014 at the Brooklyn Domino Sugar Factory. Now this piece, this installation, features a huge sphinx-like woman with caricatured mammy features in the center. She's 75 feet tall, made out of 70,000 pounds of sugar. She's surrounded by 15 resin-cast molasses sugar babies. This installation reminds us that our sweet tastes of refined sugar come from Caribbean sugar plantations that were run by slaves. And it also goes further to ask us, in what ways does slavery and imperialism still stay with us today? As an artist consultant, it is my job to also ask these difficult questions, to ask artists what it is they care about. Conviction and purpose is what makes an artist's work good, but also what makes artwork so good. It carves out a place, sometimes huge places, for these questions to be asked. It gives a platform to those who cannot stand, a voice to the voiceless, because these questions need to be heard and they need to be asked. 7 years ago, Kara Walker asked these questions. She brought them to the table. And today, they're more relevant than ever. To quote Kara Walker, "The work is difficult because the history is hard. But don't you want to see it?" I know for me the answer is yes. So looking back at my art bucket list, I review it from time to time. And what I've noticed is that what I once used the artwork for solidarity or guidance or comfort, I don't see it so much as that anymore. But I see it more as a record of healing. While the artwork was once medicine, it is now just a meaningful memory of growth. I urge you to create your own art bucket list, not as a way to soften the fear of death like I had, but to use these images to think about and mark a time when you cared about something, and mark what you've overcome, and most importantly, remember what's next. Thank you.